I wanted to get to actor Hugh Grant, who secretly recorded a reporter of News of the World admitting to phone hacking. He's now suing the Metropolitan Police over their potential involvement in the hacking cases. Speaking on the BBC, Hugh Grant recounted his conversation with the tabloid reporter.
By sheer coincidence, I broke down in the middle of Kent in my car. It's a long story, but basically a guy got out of a car the other side of the road, started taking pictures of me. He was Paul McMullen, this ex-News of the World features editor, and I was swearing at him, etc. And anyway, I finally got talking to him, and he started boasting about how my phone had been hacked and all the dirtiest tactics of the News of the World, and about their relationship with the police, and about their relationship with 5 successive prime ministers. I was revolted and astonished, and then I went back a few months later to the pub he now runs in Dover and pretended to be dropping in for a pint, and I bugged him. It seemed like symmetry, and I got him talking again about all these things, and I published them all in the New Statesman.
And what did he admit?
Well, all the things I've just said, that, you know, how extensive and what an industrial scale phone hacking went on at the News of the World, particularly under Andy Coulson, how it wasn't just the News of the World, it was all the tabloids, and how money regularly passed hands between News International and officers at the Metropolitan Police, how Margaret Thatcher was the first Prime Minister to realise that it's very hard to get elected in this country without the backing of the Murdoch press, so she was the first one to become an undignified sycophant to that organisation, to that media tycoon, a pattern that's been followed by every single Prime Minister since, including this one. And he did, when I asked him, because I'd heard a rumour, I said, and do you think the News of the World hacked the phones of the family and friends of the little girls murdered at Soham? He said, yes, I think that almost certainly happened.
That was actor Hugh Grant. He said that McMullen admitted to the hacking going on, the phone hacking, not only at News of the World, but other newspapers. So let's take it from there, Nick Davies. You've been on this story now for years. What is left to expose? What do you think was most important that came out of the parliamentary hearings? What wasn't asked? And where are you headed now?
Hey, that was a lot of questions. Okay, so what remains to be exposed? So what Hugh Grant says there is correct, first of all, that the criminal activity was going on in lots of other newspapers in Fleet Street. Whether or not we get to expose that depends on whether or not we can actually find evidence to prove it, because if all you do is to state it without being able to produce evidence, they'll deny it. So that's one whole chunk of stuff. There's another whole thing about whether or not this story has a US end to it. And I would say it wouldn't be surprising if it turned out that Murdoch journalists visiting the United States had done this kind of thing. It wouldn't be surprising if Murdoch journalists permanently based for his news organizations in the States had done these kind of things. But we need to be careful, because it is all about evidence. And I have a bit of a worry at the moment that one of the tabloids over here a few days ago, the Daily Mirror, ran a big front page story which implied that victims of 9/11 had had their phones hacked by Murdoch journalists. Now, at the moment, I'm not aware that there is any evidence anywhere to support that. And if at the end of the current FBI inquiry, they come up empty and say, well, we can't find the evidence, then you can bet that the Murdoch crew will use that to try to discredit the entire story. And it does worry me that the Daily Mirror shot off too early. So that's a worry as to whether or not. But in general terms, I would say it's highly likely that evidence could be produced. And the other interesting thing is this story breaking overnight, which is whether or not the Murdoch people were using private investigators to do illegal things on the commercial, not on the journalistic side of their operation. Were they engaged in industrial espionage, for want of a better word? So there's at least 3 different ways for the story to keep breaking.
And in terms of the impact politically on the Prime Minister Cameron and the impact on Scotland Yard?
Well, so the impact on Scotland Yard has been absolutely huge. You know, the commissioner has resigned, the assistant commissioner who was responsible for the job has resigned. They face an internal police inquiry, which is likely to throw up more dirt, and then a judicial inquiry, which is going to focus in on the implications of their far too cosy relationship with Rupert Murdoch and their failure to enforce the law. I mean, there's a lot of damage being done. So far as Cameron is concerned, it's a slightly greyer picture. Clearly, it's doing him political damage. Will the story reach the point where he's actually forced to leave office? I've never thought it would, but the temperature is rising. There's an interesting story breaking about how when David Cameron, as Prime Minister, hired Andy Coulson, formerly of the News of the World, to be his media advisor. He failed to put him through the normal level of vetting. Now, that's a strange thing to do. You would think that that was part of the routine. You're going to be allowed into the Prime Minister's office. You're going to see the most secret paperwork, take part in the most secret meetings. You have to be fully vetted. Well, he was vetted up to only a sort of medium level. What was that about? That begins to look like somebody took a decision not to look too deep in case they came up with a reason which wouldn't allow them to hire him. And you understand in the background, the reason they feel they have to hire him is they have to have the Murdoch organisation on side, otherwise they can't run the country, and therefore if you can have a Murdoch man in your office, that establishes the connection. So that's what tempts Cameron to make a terrible mistake. But we haven't got there yet. We do not have, at the moment, evidence which would force the Prime Minister out of office.
Nick Davies, I want to thank you for being with us, award-winning investigative journalist for The Guardian, speaking to us from The Guardian's offices in London. We will link to all of your articles. Thanks so much.
Good luck.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. When we come back, we'll speak with Haaretz journalist Amira Haas. She's the Israeli journalist who is aboard a small boat that did make it out of Greek waters trying to challenge the Israeli blockade of Gaza. The ship was intercepted by the Israeli military. She'll talk about what happened. Then we'll look at a new anti-boycott law just passed by the Israeli Knesset. Stay with us.